Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to our second day of the workshop that Andy Brunskill, my colleague, and I were running. If you were with us yesterday on day one, welcome back. And if you're a newcomer, welcome to day two. And as you can see, the description of the workshop, just to remind you, is a water utility sewage treatment plant workshop to deliver asset optimization performance using the TPM system of work by working in partnership with the asset owner and the operations and maintenance. And what Andy and I will set out to do on this second part today is to share with you again how you can drive and sustain business change, deliver operational excellence, and most importantly, create a company culture that supports and sustains improvement through delivery of an effective and sustainable partnership. And we're able to delivery, we'll be sharing experience of two case studies, one of which is working with a major UK water utility in TPM principles applied to two of their largest sewage plants, and the other is a wastewater utility who's just starting out on their journey based on the American continent. So this was our agenda for both days, over the 2 days. So let's highlight today's session here, day two, where following this brief introduction, we're going to spend a bit of time digging deeper, 20 minutes digging deeper within wastewater utilities case studies. And then most importantly, we're going to then focus on a further 20 minutes of the hour, looking at how you can set about scoping your TPM program in a particular facility, and how you then build in the second part of that session into the key stakeholder buy-in session to the scoping study outputs. And we'll spend the last 6 minutes or so looking at the second exercise of how you align your strategic business drivers as a takeaway exercise. We did one yesterday, as those of you who were there yesterday know, and we're going to do a second one. And then that leaves us for 5, 6, 7 minutes at the end to look at today's key learning points, final thoughts, and an evaluation of what the workshop has given us.
I'm Roger Williams. I'm the operator. Has been working alongside the lean team, and as a part of my green belt, we've been doing of the GBT belts here at Cogmores. The GBT belts, also known as gravity belt thickeners, are an important part of the process here. Previously, we were having a lot of issues with these. Multiple breakdowns, we have sludge that we couldn't process, which wasted a lot of our time and ended up causing a lot of cost to the customers. So our previous state, which you've got a slide of up here on the board, I just do a bit of explanation of what the graph shows. So if you look at the yellow and the green lines, which you can see going in the upward trend, they're the level of our primary sludge holding tanks. The yellow lines are the flow to our thickeners, and the pink lines are the sludge coming over from our primary tanks, which obviously feeds the primary sludge holding tanks. The previous state, as you can see, is as soon as there's a failure, which you see the flow going to the GBT stops. As soon as that stops, tanks fill up. Once the tanks are full, which is the top line up there, it turns the SDM pumps off. While the SDM pumps are off, the sludge is just constantly thickening up in the primary tanks. We hope to get sludge going on to our belts about 1.5%. But during a time like this, where the sludge isn't being taken out of the primary tanks due to GBT failures, they have been up over the 4% mark. When they are that high, you can't get it over the belt, so tankers do have to come on site. I think about £1,000 a day. Sometimes we have 2 or 3 tankers going out constantly throughout the day, so it is a large cost. You can see when we do get the belts up and running again, we might only be up for a few hours, and what happens is we'll leave site after finishing the day's work. We think we get it sorted. As soon as we leave, the GBTs will fail and the tanks will be full. Again, same process. The sludge will be thickening up in the primary tanks, and coming the next day, first thing in the morning, we'll have issues, and again, tanks will have to be called in. So we're currently in the control room here at Cogmoors, just looking at current state after a few weeks of running our project. As you can see by the trends, this is live over the past 7 days. So this, the graph says it already. We've had constant levels in the tanks. We've had minor adjustments where the tanks are filled up slowly, just because we haven't been beating it. So we adjusted maybe 1 litre, and we'll just bring it back over a few days instead of running things at 100%. We've just slowly been chipping it down, making minor adjustments here and there. We've gone a whole week without breakdown, which was unheard of previously. So I think things are looking a lot better, and we just hope it'll carry on. I think
yeah, so that's what you then get before. Yeah. So then starting off with
in an ideal situation, you can have 3 belts up and running, so any breakdown, you can just jump on to the next one. But no.
Yeah.
Hopefully this doesn't work towards
Transfer path? Yeah, transfer pump where that would have been used. The comment of that.
I think the valves on it, like, but it's fucking almost so far. Actually, probably in the tanks.
Start.
Yeah,
As well as, we did have new ones, didn't we?
Yeah, I did think quite about it. There's a trailing engine and
The molecule comes in, we spin in, and then you've got the beach over here then, which forces
The
the,
what?
it's called the beach.
Right, what's the meaning then?
When the beach, as in the sand,
Right,
the water will go back down,
right.
sludge go up. The sludge goes up, and it helps make it thicker.
spinning opposite directions, don't it?
Yeah. So the scroll is spinning opposite to the bowl. The solids come over here, and the sediment comes at the back end.
So the types of issues you have with it?
With those in particular,
Yes.
block ports along here, with the, not so much block ports here, but where the scroll is welded into the shaft, all that is supposed to be slots. That fills up with rag, causes imbalance, fills up with grit. The ports where the sludge come out and the sediment come out, they get blocked with rag, grit, causes imbalance again. And also, if you make it too dry and you feed overfeeding, it can't get out quick enough.
Right.
So that's what was happening previously with the 9 litres, just shoving so much in, can't get out quick enough.
And you didn't, and there's a problem with the conveyor, isn't there, taking it away as well?
All I was said that it drops down onto a conveyor which takes it away. That couldn't move it quick enough.
And that was backing up then?
That would back up and eventually put more belts up on something.
How does it
using the critical assessment, we looked at safety, availability, performance, reliability, maintainability, environment, cost. And then using the form like this, then we'll do it in a bit. And you just go through, and what it does, it picks out the kind of worst offender.
Yeah.
And it's usually not what you think it is.
This is worse than that lad, there was our feet at the pump. So he had to throw cut on him so we can get a small piece of it used to be underneath. It just was the expansion comes up. Well, yeah, it was 6 inches. That's where the floor is for them.
So that rest of the floor is sample point for circulating zone. Just goes on the floor.
The sample point or something they mentioned,
It was the drainage.
It goes into there's not it still goes across the path to get into the drain. So look at the drain, it's in the middle of the path. And then to get from the sample point to the drain, it's got across the path. So it blocks up. Yeah, because it blocks up.
Oh, so just leave it open so something
It's good at constant.
Just to help you visualize the process here, we have some photos at the start of the TPM journey of the polymer feed area and the gravity belt thickness. And you can see the current state of the polymer dosing area, the spillage on the floor, and the number of near misses and accidents as a result of these spillages. The surface is very slippy. The polymer is leaking from the IBC bag. The yield from the IBC feeding the polymer at ground level was poor. And here we have the after photos. And here you can see 20 weeks later, a much improved environment. Firstly, the poly spills have been eliminated. The leaks eliminated by changing the diameter. The yield from the IBC bags on the polymer is improved as the IBC bag is now on an incline and empties the whole contents. The bund wall has been repaired and the blower unit that was previous on the floor has been installed, and the noise level has been reduced considerably to the extent that hearing protection is no longer needed.
Install wet heads and
Oh, you don't wait there, 40 months.
yeah,
No, doing this. I didn't like the bottom of what's that?
40 months at the box.
You're looking at that as well. What's that?
It's right there.
No, you've got to truck it.
So if we just run through the activity board then, we started off on day one looking at the sources of information. So we've got quite a lot of sources of information there. We've looked at how trustworthy the information is, and actually quite pleasingly, we don't have anything there below a 3, so that's pretty good. And we've got quite a lot of 4s and 5, which means that the quality of the information is very good or excellent. So that's, you know, a good starting place for getting our background data and how it's operating. We could do with some more information on schematics. I think really to really look at some of the criticalities further on, we really do need to break down that schematic. So somebody needs to go away and find that schematic. I'm looking at Roger here now. Have a word with Sean and see if we can find the detailed schematic for the centrifuge and for any other bits of equipment within the area that you know, that are quite crucial to this. I don't know whether there might be schematics for poly makeup and that sort of thing as well. Okay. So we did some really good work on the OEE. This is you know, this is really good. We do need to put a lot of thought into how we calculate this so it means something to us, and so that we can come up with a template that actually reflects what we're going to do in the other parts of the business when we roll this out. So it's really important that we get this right and we make it meaningful. So I know you're going to review that now, and we'll have a look at that when we see you next Thursday, won't we? And we'll try and work that template. And then we'll probably put 4 weeks of data into it and see what it looks like, and then review it again as a group and work with it for a few weeks to see if we're happy with how we're calculating it. Okay? And we'll be doing that on the GBT figures first, and then we'll try it on the centrifuge figures, but we'll do GBTs to trial it, okay? So we looked at the losses in stage 3, and that gives the basis to see where we can find some of the wastes within the process and where we can make things make improvements. And then we went on to criticality assessment. The criticality assessment is pretty detailed, really pleased with that. We get some quite high scores on there, so maybe the poly system, I think there's quite a lot of work that can be done with that. And Matt very kindly said that he would look into finding what we could have in a way of self-contained poly unit and looking at the cost of that, because there may be some funding available, especially if it is a mobile unit that if we have changes to the site we could utilise elsewhere. I think we've got more credibility for actually having it in the short term if it's a mobile unit that could be utilised elsewhere on other sites. So that might be a goer. So Matt's going to follow up on that. We've got some good things on the spot rock. There's a lot of work to be done there. There's some easy wins, but it's time. I'd rather we focused on finishing the asset optimisation on the GBTs first. But if there is something in there that while you're doing repair, you've got to clear it up anyway, or you've got got something that you could do at the same time, and obviously try and pick up the quick wins in there as we go along. But that's there's quite a bit of work in there to get that right. We'll have a tidy Tuesday, hopefully next Tuesday, maybe make a start on that. To certainly, it's literally a quick half hour in the GPT area to get it back to as it was, and there's a few boxes in there that could do with getting back to the state it was, and maybe make a start on this. But I mean, that's more than one tidy Tuesday there. But with a few bodies in there, we might be able to make an impact on it. We've also then gone on to the total asset pairs. There's lots of checks that could be done, and some of them are being done, some of them aren't being done. These are the things that we need to really iron out and implement before we get that refurbished centrifuge back into service. Okay, as soon as that goes back into service, we need to be making sure that the asset care that we're doing on that we can control to try and minimise the impact of any breakdowns or any blockages as much as we can. Obviously, we can't do anything about the lag that's coming through the system with the strain precedent, but you've already, you're the experts in this, you've identified things within this process that you can do to try and minimise the actual blockages, by reducing the flow and by keeping it running as much as it can, and by making sure that cleaning cycle is actually run, or forcing that cleaning cycle to run before it all becomes too dry and hard. And then we went on to the final step, where we were looking at standard operating procedures, and we talked about the two types of SOPs. We call them SOPs within business, but really within this process, you've got SOPs, standard operating asset care, and then we're going to go for standard operating procedures, which will actually how you operate the asset to its optimum. So I think to cut down on the bulk, we should have a quick reference guide back. Now we understand how we need to run the GBTs and the centrifuges to the spec that they were designed, that we have quick reference, asset care SOPs, and then quick reference, asset operation SOPs that say, depending on the thickness coming in, depending on the tank levels, the different ways you run that piece of equipment.
So, from an audit and review process, the team progressively worked through 4 maturity milestones, which are basically introduction, define best practice and standardise, building capability, and striving for zero losses. And there's some audits against each of those of 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, etc., etc. One of the other things that we've done, this is an example of what the guys have done, is capturing the benefits. So using this 6C of customer, colleague, compliance, cost, capacity, capability, what are the benefits of the work that's been done? Right? If we start to look at some of those benefits and some of the stuff from a financial point of view, as well as obviously the culture and the development of people, this is an interesting one. This is the benefits of AO and the centrifuges. So these are the costs. This is the cost of maintenance, direct reactive maintenance, which you can see progressively decreased since the introduction of AO, although that 40k included the refurb costs. And at 2018, I think it came out about 22, and that trend has improved significantly. Interestingly enough, manual interventions reduced by 15%. Consistent cake, which means basically we've got fewer skips, which is less cost in terms of transport, because the cake is at the right specification. Reduced poly consumption in a safer environment. And if you translate that, the company's got 47 centrifuges, 47 of these things across 30 sites. They set a target 15k per centrifuge. They've saved 300k to date, and the target is to hit 1.5 million by the end of next year. Okay? If we look at these things here called primary settlement tanks, again, similar sort of figures. These are the breakdown costs, and in 2018, compare that to 15 and 16, 20k, and no breakdowns in the last 22 months, and zero costs for having to bring tankers in to empty the vessels out. And if we look at the belt thickness, improved the performance by 33%, running at improved speed, and a 60% reduction in the dry solids. So quite significant results there. And
we now move on to how we should set about scoping your own TPM program within your water utility and what the implications of that scoping study might be. So we can express TPM, as shown here, as an enabling system and philosophy for delivering operational excellence under the 3 Ps. The first one of purpose, how the customer needs are understood and converted into strategy. The second one of process, of how value is created within the organization. And the third one of people, and how people are trained, upskilled and managed, all focusing on customer results. So let's look at each in turn. Our systems model of TPM has a purpose, which we'll delve into each of these 3 in a moment, where our program is applied via a defined introductory and deployment process within the utilities business unit. That's the purpose. The process is our 11-step model applied through a defined sequence of team-based learning by doing. And the third one, the outputs of this application are aligned to an evidence-based assessment process linked to the team's progress through our model, the people emphasis. So let's look at each in turn. The purpose has 6 steps as a training implementation process shown here. The first 3 steps are concerned with securing management commitment before we then develop the policy and how it's deployed by trialing and proving the route across 4 milestones, 1 to 4, and that comprises steps 4, 5, and 6. The timescales there across the bottom are indicative, not absolute, but the first 3 steps of scoping preparation and tailoring that to suit our own TPM training program, with the essential step 2 key stakeholder 1-day buy-in session of those scoping study outputs, before we then launch into a 4-day TPM practitioners training workshop. And those typical timescales across the bottom would take first couple of months, and then months 3 to 6 could typically be steps 4, rolling out or starting on a TPM pilot project and achieving milestone 1 before we go into rollout over the following 2 years and beyond. So there's a pilot process followed by the rollout evolution. So let's dig deeper into each one of these. Our 4-step, 11-step TPM enabling process follows this measurement cycle, condition cycle, and problem prevention cycle and sustainment cycle. And the first 8 steps, as we explored yesterday, are the equipment-based steps, steps 1 to 8, comprising the measurement, the condition, and the problem prevention and elimination. And then finally, the softer sustainment steps, which comprise individual and team skill development, leadership and behaviors, and audit review processes. And the ownership journey, the people aspects, takes us through 4 levels or 4 milestones, where we move from bottom left, reactive, where we gain control, stabilize our processes in the utility, optimize and then improve those processes so that we can then forecast with confidence and become totally proactive. And classically, what we find up until milestone 1, problems are given to management with top-down improvement before the TPM process is able to start and push the bottom-up improvement when we're stabilizing towards self-managed team activities, optimizing, where we can strive to hit the 4 zeros that we set right at the very beginning. And those 4 zeros are typically 0 accidents, because people do not come to work to get injured, 0 breakdowns, 0 defects, and 0 operator interventions, if we want to be truly world-class and be able to forecast the future with confidence. And we also have defined evidence-based audit review criteria at each of those 4 maturity levels, where we move from reactive, proactive, excellent across those 4 levels. And those audit review processes, which are very detailed and evidence-based, are passed over to the local CI TPM teams over an agreed time frame. And step 3, which is the last step of the securing management commitment, comprises running a 4-day practitioners training event where each of the 20 delegates, 20 or thereabouts delegates, probably in 4 teams of 5 people each, touch each of those 11 steps over 4 days, not to get a result, although they do, but it's to prepare them for the full-blown pilot project that's going to come at step 4. And they share their experiences, strengths, and hopes about the process on the 4th day as a feedback to themselves and the site leadership teams. And they, as you can see, use the centerpiece of the 11-step process of what they found out on their mini pilot over those 4 days. And I stress again, this is not to get a result, although they do get some. It's to understand what's now coming in a full-blown pilot project that could typically take 20 to 26 weeks to get to milestone 1. So just to summarize that bit and emphasize that 4 to 6 we'll come on to now, having covered the first 3. It's a journey where our capability improves over 2 years minimum, but 3 to 5 years in bigger plants wherever. And where we're going from an initial pilot to try and improve the process, get everyone involved into milestone 1. And then we refine in milestone 2 the best practices and standardize them that we've started in milestone 1. In other words, we're getting the basics right. We then build our capability at milestone 3, and people become really innovative because we're tapping in to their minds of gold. And then eventually at milestone 4, those 4 zeros that we strive for right from the beginning, of 0 accidents, 0 defects, 0 breakdowns, and 0 interventions, actually become a reality. And we achieve the spark to start vision that we set right at the very beginning. And what's going on over that period in terms of input, ownership and responsibility is shown in the bottom part, where the TPM facilitators pass over their learned know-how to the maintainers and operators team working as, if you will, the asset owners. And supervisors and forepersons and superintendents and managers become coaches, but the manager's real job is as champions, which we'll explain that phrase later on, and the leadership team is definitely the sponsor, proactive sponsor of this process. So step 4, when we move into the policy deployment and area, right, of taking those first 3 steps learning, where we trial and prove the 11-step process, having secured management commitment through those first 3 steps, and the objectives of launching the real pilot project over 26 weeks can be summarized there, is to do all of those things. Raise awareness of the hidden losses, the techniques to eliminate them and the value of doing so, highlight gaps in the fabric of management which needs to be addressed to create the right cultural environment. This affects everyone, and we all need to change the way we do things here. There's parallel use of the 5S philosophy to raise safety standards and begin the process of problem ownership. Performance and measure to record progress with specific evidence-based audits and reviews. And it's to put the governance structure in place so that the eventual utility-wide deployment of TPM has the underpinning support of pillar champions, and we'll explain that phrase later, responsibilities, and a training and coaching needs. And we gain experience of the application of the principles and techniques contained within that 11-step improvement plan, our football, as moving from learning by understanding to learning by doing on the plant, including other training and tools as appropriate. We're actually defining the continuous improvement master plan during this period to provide priorities and transformation of that culture. A lot to take in, but it can be summarized on this governance infrastructure there for the TPM journey part. On the left-hand side, we have these pillar champions, and all these initials mean OE, over effectiveness, frontline operator asset care champion, planned maintenance and quality of maintenance champion, and skill development champion, and early equipment management champion. As Andy described yesterday in the principles, together with 5S champion, publicity and communications, logistics, quality assurance, and health safety environment. That is driving a master plan, rollout plan in the middle, where in the top-down triangle, you have a steering group that's concerned with facilitator training development, as well as frontline management coaching, publicity and communications. And then you've got the real drive of the bottom-up 11-step improvement process and the parallel 5S supporting processes of workplace organization. And your organization will be learning on this journey and will be driven by a top-down pillar champion 30-point review summary that's carried out roughly twice a year. And each of those 30 points, one of those pillar champions on the left-hand side is tied to each of those 30 points, at least one pillar champion. So there is no escape from accountability and responsibility. And then you've got the bottom-up evidence-based audits running from level 1A, 1B model to 4A, 4B, and they are evidence-based, not hearsay. Now, if we take those background points and we look at one of our case studies here, the Welsh Water, the way in which they've interpreted this into their business model, very similar to our 3Ps, but adapted to their situation, where they wanted to change the culture particularly. So we're looking at leadership and behaviors that promote a culture of continuous improvement. The systems of work, making CI business as usual. It's a habit, like cleaning your teeth every morning. And your capability with deployed tools and techniques to enable continuous improvement to take place. And aligning that CI to the business and customer requirements. Customer requirements bang in the center. And if we look at that in terms of the Welsh Water Vision, they had been doing reliability-centered maintenance for some years before, 2 or 3 years before TPM was introduced 2 or 3 years ago. Not instead of, but to build on that, and driven by these five behaviors, if you like, as part of lean principles: to understand customer value, to engage colleagues, which is why that one's highlighted, to understand end-to-end processes, to create flow and pull, and to be excellent in everything we do, constantly trying to be better at what we do. A very simple definition of continuous improvement says what's good enough today is not going to be good enough tomorrow. So we have to take it on board. So the training plan that comes out of that is based on encouraging effective partnerships, as we described earlier today, to continue to flourish and grow within a continuous improvement environment, and a culture of involvement through ownership of outcomes. And there's the 11-step process again, just to remind ourselves of that. We go through the 8 equipment steps there because we want to A, measure current state and identify opportunity, and B, review the condition of that asset, including safety, energy, and environmental issues. In step 5, the condition appraisal is in 2 parts and is often affectionately called spot the rot, the condition appraisal, before we restore it to as new, and so on. Then we have C, the problem prevention cycle and best practice routines of standard work. Then to realize that future state, D, is a habit of continuous improvement, where we've got the 3 soft non-equipment issues of individual and team skill development, leadership and behaviors, audit and review processes. So coming back, and let's look in more detail now on what a scoping study really means. And that is immediately followed by the key stakeholder buy-in, 1-day buy-in session to the scoping study output. That second step is non-optional, must be done. So let's look at what the scoping study sets out to do. Again, this is very busy, but the objectives of the plant-specific study are to look at those things there by fully specifying the implementation training plans to cover all of those aspects there. The pilot application, the likely benefits, the shift logistics, how are we going to do this, the team sizes, the membership. This is about obsessive attention to detail, plus the resourcing costs. Who are these key contact pillar champions? What's the initial awareness, communication, and training plan actually in terms of its timing? And what facilitators do we need to support those requirements and their training and those pillar champions and so on? We also put very much in this a cultural maturity assessment of people's perceptions and readiness for the TPM training program, to know what the challenges are going to be and what the good bits are about working for your company and the not so good bits. And while we're doing that, we're assessing equipment and door-to-door and supply chain losses, not just equipment, for the future. And we carry out a cost-benefit appraisal to identify the critical success and risk factors. And the exercise that we're going to do at the end of today for you to take away focuses on what are the critical success and risk factors. So we can develop a first cut plant-wide rollout approach. And the following slides review that as shown now. Here's a very busy week. We were involved last year, running from Monday through to Friday, where we went through that process of scoping, which we'll look at the moment. It's a full hands-on week where we're doing awareness sessions, we're looking at loss profiles, we're interviewing people, we're sounding off against a core in-house facilitator team how this program is going to carry forward. We're interviewing the site leadership team and getting ready for their sign-off the following week. And the process we've gone through in that week is shown here. Step one, we all need to understand what the business objectives are now, what the vision is now, and those current initiatives. What's going on TPM to fit with that? And what's the progress of continuous improvement? We're then also going to do a maturity assessment of people's perceptions and feelings by taking them through 28 statements on a one-to-one basis. We're also going to do a detailed assessment in 3 of the OEE through a production loss profile or operations loss profile and review the implications of what that will be for the pilot, because we need to identify the pilots in 4 and whether it's 1, 2, 3 or 4 pilots. And so we can come up with the training development needs of awareness, pivot champions, facilitator, and management and pilot teams. And therefore we can design the project infrastructure and the governance system and define the program definition and the cost implications of this over the next 2 or 3 years. Because that needs to feed back into number 8. What are the key success factors, the benefits, the risk assessment, and way forward? So the leadership team can agree to mobilize and agree those individual requirements, making sure it fits the business objectives. So that's why it's a hectic 1-week system. During that week, and this is an example, the one we just showed you, some of the outputs that come out of that scoping study, Andy and I ran 6 awareness sessions of 1 hour covering 125 employees, just getting them pre-educated to the possibility of a TPM awareness session. And the delegate rating on the scale of 1 to 5, where 1 was okay, 4 is very good and 5 is excellent, was 4.13 out of 5. So excellent or very good relevance was 88%. The overall assessment was 82%, and that's good. And we also carried out 20 45-minute interviews on a one-to-one basis doing these 28 perceptions that covered 4 maintainers, 4 operators, and 12 key contacts and managers. So there's where the score for the feedback of the detail of the awareness sessions. Moving on. Some of the comments that came out of those awareness sessions are shown here from the floor, as it were, a sample of the comments. I think the approach is spot on and hope everything gets fixed. We've currently too many problems. I really like this and believe we can go for it. So we're preconditioning people, raising expectations in order that we can all deliver. We need to deliver the training at an achievable pace to build on our capability. It was good debate towards the end of the session and an excellent review because it's provoked honest discussion. So we also, during the course of that week, carried out a maintenance self-assessment exercise, which is ranking 10 statements here. And the individual delegates and some of the awareness groups to do that from the perspective of their work area and adding up their score on a scale of 3, 2, 1, 0, maximum of 30. And those statements, which is really difficult to see on here, but it's an honesty check. I'm not going to read them all to you, but the first one says, our plant, machines and equipment may not be fit for our current and future process production mode. Do you think that statement is very true? Or you strongly agree, you'd give it a 3. If you think it's true, agree, give it a 2. If you think it's partially true or agree, 1. Or if you think it's false or disagree, give it none, 0. So just pick one more. Number 9. Production and maintenance seem to have different objectives and priorities, and as a result, resources and or timing issues often conflict scoring. So you're going to end up with a score out of 30. And here are the results. 40 during the week, honesty checks, sometimes in single groups, sometimes with 6 people in the group. And the range of the scores on that scale is shown there. And the average score was 23, which suggests they've a major opportunity improvement. But 15 of them think we have a significant scope for improvement, but really good, honest recognition. There were none in the 5 to 11 where we're doing well, but can still gain some benefits. And there were none in the 1 to 4 where we're almost world class. And thankfully, nobody was delusional and said we're the world's best. Now, the point is that TPM addresses each one of these 10 fundamental reasons for gaps in our existing maintenance, recognizes that it's the person carrying out those tasks who's the key, and the way in which he or she is supported to achieve true cost effectiveness. So a vital bit of output for us, because if you do that again 3 years into your program, you'll find that most of those 21s to 30s are in the 12 to 20s. There'll be a lot of in the 5 to 11, and there'll be a few in the 1 to 4. It's a way of measuring maturity process on that aspect. We also did 20 interviews in that example of 4 maintainers, the red dots, squares rather, 4 operators, and 12 key contacts. 1 face-to-face 45-minute interviews using 28 statements. And what it measures on the scale of those 28 statements is how participative the management style is, running from right to left, and how much employee involvement there is. We'll look at a summary in a minute, but this clearly shows that 60% of the 20 felt reasonably agreed that it was participative management, irrespective of their job, and also that there was good employee involvement, 60%. And the other 15 and 15 are there, and the 10 there. But the key is, if you take a diagonal on that, as shown there, 60% of those 20 delegates feel that there's a lot of participative management, but it's not delivered in employee involvement. So that's the brilliant part of it. And of those 28 statements, here are the top hinderers, right? And what came through very loudly in this example is that our equipment, don't worry about the numbers on the right, left-hand side. That's just a way of, we analyze it. Our equipment spare holding is poor, 82% strength of feeling, as shown there. All the maintainers 100% agree with that. We suffer from too many initiatives that end up as a flavor of the month, 65 strength of feeling. Not so with the key contacts and managers, because anything above 50 is a strong strength of feeling. Skills are picked up rather than learned systematically. Interdepartmental communication is poor. The question actually says, when it comes to different on-site departments, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. And that's how they answered it. There is a fixed attitude to change. That last one has got a very low overall, but 58% of the operators felt that the business vision is not actually clear to me. Not too bad with the maintainers, but very, very clear to the managers and supervisors, which is reflected in that diagonal before. We can also look at what helps progress. Standard methods are important, 95%. We should introduce a team-based approach. The question says we should not introduce a team-based approach. It's purposely asked negative to make people think about it. They strongly disagree with that, as shown there. 90% agreement it should. The company does take safety seriously. The question is asked, the company does not take safety seriously. And the operators feel that that is true to an extent, but the other two don't. Lines of responsibility are clear to me. So those things encourage progress, help progress. The other thing that we can do on the next slide is to pull out that 7 of the 28 statements show how that individual feels treated, another 7 how the team works, another 7 how the management works, and the final 7 how the company works. And the lower the score, the better in this. And anything above 40, right, represents an opportunity. So it's clear here that TPM philosophy will most certainly help and address the high ratings of how the team works, which is universally accepted there. And going back to that slide, is also that the management works not as well as it thinks it does, 28% there. But it's not to drive a wedge, it's a true honesty of where we are. So moving on. One of the things that we ask in the 28th session is a final question which says, if I was in charge of this plant utility for the next 2-3 years, what would I try most to change or address? The $64,000 question. And these are some of the responses we got back from those 20 interviews. We need accurate data we can trust on the OE, downtime and quality for starters. We need a balanced set of KPIs. We need to continue to get everyone more engaged, keep going with the morale improvements we have. And this one I love. Let's take the machines and start running them rather than letting the machines run us. 12-shift working is not working particularly well, and so on. So some really good insights. Improved engagement of the area. Just to summarize those perception results, what it showed is 60% feel participative management style is lagging behind the actual willingness to be involved. In other words, they're positioned to the left of that diagonal, but 60% feel encouraged. And the TPM program will directly address 4 of the top perceived hinderers. Initially, it may well add to the top hinderer, which said we suffer from too many initiatives that had become the flavour of the month. But most feel that the availability of the right spares at the right time is a major issue, and cross-departmental communications can be understood better. And most want TPM to be implemented, but the majority are concerned if management will sustain the commitment. Right. You will recall that during these 2 workshop sessions, we have 2 exercises that you can review and take away with you, with your colleagues, back to carry out in your specific utility tomorrow, next week, whenever. First is to show you how the key learning points might impact on your future management of operations and maintenance, both from the perspective of the utility asset owner and the service provider. There are just 4 slides here, 2 formats and 2 examples. The first part of the exercise is called drivers and stoppers. So you need to list down with your colleagues back in your utility, what are your particular business drivers for your utility? And then say to each other and the team, from what we've heard today in this workshop session, what is the potential impact of joint partnership working through TPM going to give us to deliver that business driver? Is it nothing, a 0? Is it something 1? Is it 2 significant or 3 major? So if you listed out 8, you would score, like on this example, a total out of 24. And as you can see on this example, which don't copy it, but obviously use it to provoke discussion and agreement, you can see that both were significant, 92% and 83%. So the second part of the exercise is shown on this format, saying that if it is significant as we've illustrated, what's going to stop these new ways of working through partnership using TPM as a system of work? What's going to stop it from taking hold? So again, you list down here all of the stoppers, and it may be 3, it may be 6, it may be 4, it doesn't 8, it doesn't matter. But then say, in order for that, if that's going to stop it taking hold, what is our countermeasures to minimize the risk of that happening as members of the leadership team? And again, there's an example of the stoppers and the countermeasures from 2 of those teams. So take away those exercises and that particular one back to your utility and see how it goes and what it shows you in terms of the potential impact of TPM as a system of work to make partnership really work, and what's going to stop it from happening. So that last 55 minutes went really quickly. So let's just review our agenda, because we're now onto the wrap-up session of today's key learning points, some final thoughts, and evaluation of the workshop. So today's key learning points we can perhaps summarize as these 3 bullet points. The front-end business leadership team and other key stakeholders' one-day buy-in session is fundamental to the future success of your program, immediately following the outputs of the scoping and planning study, and we would say is non-optional. As such, the scoping study needs to provide you with an in-depth evidence of a compelling business case opportunity for the leadership team to be able to sign off to, with a clear understanding of the commitment to provide the necessary resources of people, money, and time, based on a realistic risk assessment, which is what that second exercise we've just briefed out to you would help you to arrive at. So the takeaway, business drivers, stoppers, countermeasures will facilitate you with an open, honest debate with your operations and maintenance delivery partners to ensure that that essential front-end appetite is there to get started. We also, in September last year, 2019, published a book, Andy and myself and one of our colleagues, John Quirk, called TPM, A Foundation of Operational Excellence. And that's available on Amazon with that ISBN number. The good news is that it's A4 size and there are 272 pages in it. And just about every page has a diagram or an illustration or a photograph. So we gather that it is quite an easy read for you. And the final point is that if you want further information about any of this, then please contact either Andy or myself on those numbers. And on behalf of Andy and myself, I'd like to thank you for your interest in joining us today and also yesterday. And stay safe and take care.
Okay.